It's been a crazy last few days in dirt racing, and we'll begin to unravel all of it today. We're talking to Anthony Macri's Kings Royal score, an ugly week at Eldora, David Gravel versus Kyle Larson, and Bob Gardner completely losing his mind in a heat race at Farmer City. Let's go. It's Sunday, July 20th. I'm Justin Fiedler. This is DIRTRACKR Daily presented by Kubota Genuine Parts. If you're a Kubota equipment owner now or you plan to be in the future, you're going to need the myKubota app. It's an essential tool for managing your equipment efficiently and effectively. With real-time monitoring, maintenance reminders, and diagnostic alerts, myKubota streamlines operations and helps prevent breakdowns. You can also access helpful Kubota resources such as maintenance schedules and manuals. You can investigate fault codes, get help with step-by-step guides, and watch video resources to get the most out of your Kubota machine. And if you need parts or service, you can quickly locate the nearest dealer to your current location. Doesn't matter whether you're doing construction, you run a big agricultural operation, or you use Kubota machines around your home. Take control of your equipment and streamline your workflow today with myKubota. Download the app and experience the difference. You can find the app in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. You can click the links below in the video description or scan the QR code on your screen. I'm going to give you the disclaimer right now off the top today. There is so much that's happened over the last few days. There is no way I'm getting to all of it on today's show. We're going to be unpacking things, I think, for at least the next few days here. And we'll start first with Anthony Macri becoming King Anthony the 42nd last night at Eldora Speedway, a massive $200,000 win and a marquee accomplishment in his still young career. He'd already won the Weichert and the Tuscarora 50 at Port Royal, but to win a crown jewel like this and away from Pennsylvania is a significant statement for him, crew chief Joe Mooney, and that team. I think those really hardcore sprint car people out there know that Macri is more than just a guy that can win in PA, but this will no doubt silence any of that porch talk around the concrete kid. He took the lead immediately at the start from pole sitter Casey Jedrzejek and had no problem down the stretch keeping Rico Abreu and Kyle Larson at bay. What's even more crazy is it was just 2 years ago that Macri walked away from his family team at this exact weekend. And we know it was several months before things got worked out and he returned to the team. We were stunned back then over the departure, and now here we are just 2 years later with Macri wearing the crown. The rest of the top 10 included Brian Brown, David Gravel, who went 19th to 5th, Ryan Smith, Carson Macedo, Logan Schuchart, Ashton Torgerson, and Danny Dietrich. I'm sure the party for the Macri bunch went well into the morning hours and might even continue today. With all that said, and I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm glad these 4 days of racing at Eldora are over. It was a brutal week for crashes, and I think a lot of folks held their breath through a lot of the on-track action. Tyler Courtney needed surgery after his crash the other night and is likely looking at an extended absence from sprint car racing. Aaron Reitzel's incident was one of the more frightening I've seen in a long time. Those extra hits from Zach Hampton and Steven Snyder Jr. were just hard to watch. Reitzel suffered a fractured right foot, and I guess he'll probably miss time as well, and we're probably lucky that that was the worst thing that happened to him. And last night, it was Brad Sweet taking a nasty hit from Cal Thomas after going for a tumble in turns 1 and 2. Sweet also took a trip to the hospital, but was discharged overnight with all scans coming back clear. He shared to social media that he is sore and beat up. I don't know if something has changed about the racing or the track, or if it was just a bad luck week at Eldora, but none of those last 4 days were really fun to watch. After the Caleb Henry crash at Attica earlier last week, I said there are times that I really don't like sprint car racing, and those feelings continued through last night. The speed and the ferocity of the racing and the fearlessness of the drivers that strap in are all what draws us to the sport, but those things can also lead to terrible consequences. These last 4 days will have negative longer-term effects on the drivers, their families and friends, and the racing itself. And the fallout and the ripple effects won't be fully known or understood, I think, for quite a while. And honestly, I don't know how to fix any of this. I don't know if it needs to be fixed. There are people out there who are much smarter than me that can figure that stuff out, but not great to watch. Moving on to the David Gravel versus Kyle Larson situation from Friday, the two drivers went at it for that final podium spot, with Larson eventually coming out on top at the checkered with a last corner slider. Gravel didn't like the way he got raced and decided to show his displeasure to Larson after the race was over. There was some swerving and some shenanigans, and Larson eventually ended up turned around down the backstretch. I don't know that I fully believe Gravel intended to turn a 57 around, but there would be justification there if the Outlaws decided to penalize Gravel for doing so. We've seen post-race dust-ups like this go both ways, where drivers were penalized and times where they weren't. It was a frustrating week for Gravel with that penalty and then the B-main crash, and I think his frustrations just boiled over. There will be no lack of outrage, though, if gravel isn't penalized by the series. Afterwards, Larson chalked it all up to hard racing, but Gravel said this has been brewing for a while. He said back to Husitz, and he clearly thinks there's bad blood between the two sides, given the high limit outlaw stuff, the DQ last week, the history of the Cody Jacobs comments. I've even heard from some friends in the pit area that the dust-up included a confrontation between Jacobs and Paul Silva. Larson makes some big moves in a sprint car. It's honestly what makes him so incredible to watch, that he's willing and able to pull those types of passes off. And I'm honestly surprised that it's taken this long for someone to lose their cool with Larson over one of those passes. I certainly don't blame Gravel for being upset over some short sliders, but I don't think that Larson owes Gravel anything because of the championship or the fact that Larson doesn't drive sprint cars full time. Gravel made a comment about how Larson running third or fourth doesn't change his life, and that's 1,000% true. But it's also true for Gravel. Just as Gravel maybe expected Larson to yield, Gravel could have done the same. Back out, run fourth, don't take the risk. But this is racing after all. As they say, racing didn't start with the first car to hit the road. It started once we had two. Battling for a win, battling for 5th, 10th, whatever. These guys are competitors and they want every inch. That's why we watch. That's why we buy tickets, take vacation days, t-shirts, streaming, take multi-hour road trips. To see the best go wheel to wheel. Not to see one guy back out to be nice or respectful. The last thing we'll talk about today is the Bob Gardner, Daryn Klein insanity from the Mars show at Farmers City. If you missed it, it was shades of the Taylor Farling Port Royal deal going backwards around the track to get revenge, but Gardner dialed it up a notch. In their heat race, it took multiple attempts to get the race even started, and then once it did, Klein threw a slider on Gardner for the lead in turns 3 and 4. Klein tried to close it out by letting his car drift high, but Gardner was already in the spot, and his 4G machine ended up hard into the wall at the turn 4 exit. It's the type of move that would make any driver angry. Gardner had every right to be upset for what Klein pulled. As they exited 4, Gardner stayed in the gas as he started to slide, I think hoping he'd wipe out Klein in the process. It didn't work though, as Klein was able to slip away, and Gardner piled into the oncoming Dylan Thornton. And that right there, before we talk about any of the rest of Gardner's antics, is why trying to get revenge like this sucks and doesn't make sense and is pointless. Because if it would have just been Klein taking the hit, whatever. But in this case, Thornton gets collected, and he had nothing to do with it. Thornton is an innocent bystander, and this is the law of unintended consequences. Gardner can't control his emotions or the situation enough to not involve someone else. At least in this case, Thornton had a race car around him, and it wasn't a photographer or a track official standing in the infield. Unfortunately, we weren't done there, as Gardner, still seeking revenge on Klein, then pulled out onto the front straightaway going the wrong direction while the race was still green. Officials immediately then throwing the caution, because driving head-on towards the field is bad. Gardner couldn't get to Klein, so he drove through the infield, caught Klein in 4, and promptly hit him in the left rear. Since this all went down, Gardner has taken to YouTube to explain his side of the incident, and he said he wanted to flatten Klein's left rear tires so his heat race would be ruined. But again, back to unintended consequences and not having control, the contact to Klein's left rear actually turned the 10 car over onto its roof. I certainly appreciate and commend Gardner for not hiding and admitting that his actions were wrong. He did also apologize to Thornton. But someone throwing a bad slider doesn't justify turning Klein onto his roof, driving backwards onto a green track, and wiping out Thornton. As we saw with Farling, I'm sure Gardner will be handed a nice long break from competing in dirt late model racing, which he rightly deserves. There's no place for this type of behavior, and from grown-ass men. We're going to shut it down right there for today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Sunday out there. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.